Hello, and welcome to my couch. Today is kind of a spontaneous video, kind of a last minute video, so we're a little bit more laid back than I typically am. And that's because I really wanted to get this out quickly because I feel like this is a very timely topic right now. Today, I am going to be talking about my favorite books that are free to read for Kobo Plus members. And as I'm sure a lot of you have seen on social media and in the news, we are coming up on a huge Amazon boycott from March 7th to March 14th. Participating in that boycott means spending no money on any company or service owned by the Amazon Corporation, which includes Amazon Kindle. I know that a lot of Kindle readers, and especially people who read most of their books through Kindle Unlimited, are kind of panicking right now, looking for alternatives. And I know that a lot of people are considering switching to Kobo. But there is very little information about what books are actually on Kobo that I could find when I was making the switch. There are almost no recommendation lists. I feel like for Kindle Unlimited, there are thousands and thousands of blog posts and videos and TikToks and tweets of people talking about what's on there, what's worth reading. But for Kobo Plus, there's almost nothing. So I wanted to share some of the books that I have read and really enjoyed that are on Kobo Plus right now. And here we are. I actually did not come to Kobo from Amazon. I came to it from Scribd, which is now called Everand, which is the ebook subscription service I've been using since at least 2021. And I want to talk about Everand briefly because I know that this is another Amazon alternative that people are considering. But to me, it just is not worth it now that they've changed their subscription model. When I signed up for Scribd in 2021, it worked kind of the way that Kindle Unlimited or Kobo Plus works. So you paid your monthly subscription fee, and with that subscription, you got access to their whole library of ebooks and audiobooks. And you could read or listen to as many books from that library as you wanted. But recently, they've changed to a credit model, which is what services like Audible use. So not only do you pay more because their prices went up, but you get less for your subscription. Now, your monthly subscription gives you 3 credits, and you can use one of those credits to unlock an ebook or an audiobook. So you only get access to 3 ebooks and or audiobooks each month. And for someone like me who reads very quickly, reads several books a month, and who listens to a lot of audiobooks because I have a long commute for work, that just is not worth the money. So if you are considering Everand, formerly known as Scribd, as an alternative to Amazon, I will say they have a great selection. I have found some of my favorite books on there, and they have a lot of popular, traditionally published titles. I will also say that I have always found their app really easy to use. But unless you are a very slow reader and know that you won't use all 3 of those credits, it's really not worth the price of the subscription. Also, the credits don't roll over, so if you forget to redeem them every month, you just lose money, essentially. So that was why I started seeking out a new ebook subscription, and I found Kobo Plus. So for those who are not familiar with Kobo Plus, it's literally just Kobo's version of Kindle Unlimited. It works the way Kindle Unlimited works and the way that Scribd used to work before it got bad. So with Kobo Plus, you pay a set subscription fee every month, and that subscription gives you access to their entire library. One thing I really like about this service, as opposed to something like Kindle Unlimited, is that ebooks and audiobooks are in the same place. You can use the same app to read an ebook or listen to an audiobook, but they have different subscription tiers. So if you're someone who hates audiobooks and you never listen to them, you can get the ebooks only subscription, which is actually cheaper than if you get ebooks and audiobooks together. They also have an audiobook only option, so you can do just ebooks, just audiobooks, or both. And I really loved this because I hate paying for things that I don't use. So even though I do listen to audiobooks, I know other people prefer one or the other, and I like that you have that choice. But anyway, yeah, so that's a very basic overview of what Kobo Plus is. It's just another ebook subscription. It does also seem to have a lot of independent and self-published authors, which is what I really liked about Kindle Unlimited. I liked that it helped me discover new up-and-coming authors, and I definitely see that on Kobo Plus. A lot of my favorite Kindle Unlimited authors have already moved to Kobo Plus, and there's a lot of new people I'm very excited to check out as well. Speaking of which, I think it's time we start talking about my book recommendations. I know a lot of folks who are really diehard Kindle Unlimited fans are big romance readers. I think Kindle Unlimited's romance selection is probably what it's best known for. So I wanted to start off by recommending two romance authors that I really love, who both have a ton of books for free on Kobo Plus. So you can go back and read their backlog, and this could easily keep you busy for a couple of weeks. These are both queer romance authors because I am a queer person and I like to read books about other queer people. I sometimes have a hard time getting into straight romance. So these are both authors who primarily write woman for woman or female for female romance, just to clarify. The first author I want to recommend is Bridget Essex. She writes absolutely adorable, cozy, wholesome lesbian romances. She has a series that starts with A Night to Remember, and all of the books in the series are night puns, and it is a cozy romance slash portal fantasy. The first book is about this down on her luck queer woman who really loves Renaissance fairs, which, first of all, big mood, who meets a lady knight who tumbles through this magical portal from a fantasy world into our real world. So you get to read about this strong, sexy lady knight who is trying to navigate the modern world. She doesn't really understand how technology works. She's used to a place with magic and sword fights, and she finds love with this nerdy, geeky, modern woman, which I think is just absolutely perfect. That is my type of romance. And that whole series is great. I've read 4 or 5 of the books in that series. Bridget Essex also writes a lot of sapphic paranormal romance. So if you are into vampires or werewolves, she has those as well. And I don't think her books are too spicy. A lot of them are kind of a fade to black situation, and some of them are a little bit sexier. They do have explicit bedroom scenes, but it's very tame. I will say one warning. I've noticed that Bridget Essex uses cheating as a plot device in a lot of her books. It's kind of common for her protagonist to have recently broken up with their partner because of cheating, or to find out over the course of the book that they have been cheated on. I am not super bothered by that, but I know that for some people that can be really upsetting to read about, so just keep that in mind. But for the most part, her books are very wholesome and feel good. I also want to recommend S.D. Simper, who is another sapphic romance author. And S.D. Simper's books are also fantasy romance, but they tend to be a little bit darker. They tend to include horror elements. They tend to deal with darker relationship subject matter. So there might be toxic relationships that the protagonists have to work through. S.D. Simper tends to really make the characters work for their happy ending. My favorite book of theirs is The Sting of Victory, which is a really fantastic queer norm fantasy romance. The world of this one reminded me a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, which is another thing I love. I thought the protagonist and the love interest were really interesting, and it is the first book in a series. I have not read the rest of the series, but even as a standalone, I really, really enjoyed this book. I also really enjoy their book Carmilla and Lara, which is a Carmilla retelling. If you're not familiar with Carmilla, it is a vampire novel that actually predates Dracula and had lesbians in it in like the 1700s when it came out, which was huge and is huge. And this is a retelling that is much more sympathetic to the queer characters than that book written hundreds of years ago was, and gives them sort of the romantic treatment that they deserve. So highly recommend S.D. Simper as well as Bridget Essex if you're a romance person. I forgot to mention it, but S.D. Simper and Bridget Essex are both own voices authors, which means they are queer women writing books about queer women, just to be clear. The next genre I want to recommend is cozy mysteries. I've noticed that Kobo Plus seems to have a lot of the cozy subgenres, which I'm not complaining about, although it's not all I read. I do really enjoy books that have those cozy vibes. And cozy mysteries definitely do have cozy vibes, but there's actually a little bit more going on. There's actually a pretty specific definition for this genre. So, technically speaking, this is me putting my media studies hat on. Cozy mysteries are mystery novels that feature amateur detectives, so someone who's not a professional detective. Usually the detective will be a woman or an older person, but not always. They usually have a lot of really quirky or eccentric characters. The focus is usually on those characters and on their relationships, and usually the mystery will be solved by investigating those relationships. And the violence typically happens off screen. It's not described explicitly on the page. So there's usually not a lot of violence and gore in these books, which makes them great for a really light, fun read. And that's what I really love cozy mysteries for. While Agatha Christie did not invent the cozy mystery, she definitely popularized it, and she created the blueprint that authors are still following today. Thankfully, there is a ton of Christie's work on Kobo Plus. So if you haven't checked out some of her books in the past, she's called the Queen of Crime for a reason, and I highly recommend checking her stuff out. She was a very prolific author, so she has many, many, many books to work through, so this is another one that could keep you busy for several weeks. I've noticed that it's a little interesting the way that you access her work through Kobo Plus. If you go on the Kobo app and you search for a specific book, so if I searched for The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, those books will not be on Kobo Plus and you'll have to pay for them. But if you just search Agatha Christie, you'll find a collection of several of her books. It has like 5 or 10 different novels in it. And that one is free on Kobo Plus. And they have several of them. So I think most of her work is free. It's just specifically the collections that group together like a ton of different books, which is fine if you're looking for something to keep you busy for a while or something you can really sink your teeth into. As for specific book recommendations, I really love the character of Miss Marple. For those who aren't familiar, she is this sweet, kind of eccentric spinster. She's an older woman who never married, and she is just freakishly good at solving mysteries. She has lived in this tiny village her whole life, and living in that village has given her a really good sense of her neighbors, and she kind of has a sixth sense for human nature and for when people are keeping secrets. And that allows her to solve these murder mysteries that are stumping Scotland Yard and the other detectives. Classic cozy mystery setup. The character of Miss Marple was the inspiration for the show Murder, She Wrote, which is one of my favorite TV shows, one of my comfort shows. So I really love all of the Miss Marple books, but my favorite is definitely the first book that introduced the character, which is called The Tuesday Club Murders or The 13 Problems. You'll find it published under both titles. And it's actually a short story collection. So you get to read all of these different bite-sized mysteries and then see Miss Marple unravel them, which is really fun. If you're looking for something a little bit more intense, another one of my favorite Christies is And Then There Were None. This is a very popular book, so I'm sure you've already heard of it, but it is a classic serial killer mystery with 10 people who are trapped in an isolated location, and one of them is the killer. So definitely check out Agatha Christie if you haven't, or if it's been a while since you've read her books. I probably need to reread a few myself. The other cozy mystery that I want to recommend is called Murder Most Actual by Alexis Hall. And this book was just delightful. I had so much fun with this one. This is a book about a true crime podcaster and her wife who go on a vacation to I believe it's a ski lodge. It's some kind of lodge in like small bed and breakfast situation. They get snowed in with all of these eccentric characters, and then someone turns up dead. I thought this was so fun. I loved the characters. I loved the cozy mystery vibes. This is a book that's really genre savvy, so there's a lot of references to mystery media like Clue and Murder, She Wrote and Agatha Christie. So I just had so much fun. I also loved the relationship between the protagonist and her wife. I felt like that representation was really great, and I only read this a few months ago, and I'm already like craving to reread it because that's how much fun it was. I just absolutely adore this book. Moving on to books that do have some overlap with mysteries but are a little bit more spooky, a little bit more scary, let's talk about cozy horror. Cozy horror is a really new genre, so there's not an agreed upon definition for it. I guess I'll just say that for me, cozy horror novels are novels that really know how to balance feelings of comfort with feelings of fear. I think of it like the save rooms in a classic survival horror game. Having those moments of warmth and comfort is actually really important to telling an effective, scary story. And I think cozy horror authors understand that really well. I would also say that, like cozy mysteries, these are books where a lot of the violence tends to happen behind closed doors. So there's not a lot of violence, there's not a lot of gore, there's not a lot of body horror. These tend to be books that focus more on supernatural elements. So think something more like a ghost story or a gothic sort of story as opposed to something like a slasher movie. And if you are interested in cozy horror, you need to check out Darcy Coates. I know that Darcy Coates is a popular author, so I'm sure that many of you have heard of her already, but just to let you know, very nearly all of her books are on Kobo Plus. This is another author who has a huge backlog, so there are lots of things to read, and she really specializes in a solid classic haunted house story. Just some good old-fashioned spooky ghost shit happening in an old house. And if that is something you enjoy, you're really gonna love Darcy Coates. I think my favorite book of hers that I have read is The Caro Haunt, which switches up the formula a little bit by having a team of ghost investigators, paranormal investigators, investigating this supposedly haunted house. So there's people with ESP equipment, and there's a medium, and there's some historians who know about the history of the house. And I just thought that that more diverse cast of characters was really interesting. I also love the premise of like ghost busting gone wrong. It reminds me of The Haunting of Hill House or of the movie Grave Encounters. It's just a premise that I love. She also has a lot of books that have titles like The Haunting of So-and-so House. And those are more traditional, like one person in a haunted house dealing with ghost stuff, completely isolated from the outside. So if that's more your cup of tea, I highly recommend those. She also does branch out into other genres. I don't want to make it sound like she only does one thing. She has some series that are more like an urban fantasy kind of situation. She has a couple of books that are actually science fiction horror. She has a couple that deal more with serial killers or like a slasher story. So there is a lot of different genres that she works with, but I think cozy horror is what she does best. I think haunted house stories are what she's most well known for. And if that is your thing, check her out for sure. I want to wrap up this video by talking about one of my favorite genres, cozy fantasy. I love a good fantasy story. I love wizards. I love dragons. I love spells. I love goblins. I love orcs. I just love all of it. And I especially love low stakes fantasy stories because not everything needs to be an epic quest. Not everything needs to be saving the world. I love Lord of the Rings. I love that Frodo saved Middle-earth by casting the One Ring into the fires of Mount Doom from whence it came. But not every story needs to be Lord of the Rings. Not every Hobbit needs to be Frodo Baggins. We can also have Hobbits who are just struggling to open a new small business in the Shire, and we can follow their adventures as they're getting their bakery off the ground. You know, like, I love a good low stakes fantasy, but low stakes does not mean no stakes. I do need a little bit of plot. I do need like a crumb. So there has to be a story. There has to be something going on. There have to be consequences. If it's literally just slice of life fluff, I kind of tend to get bored and my ADHD gets distracted and it's really hard for me to stick with those books. So the books I'm going to recommend today nail those cozy, heartwarming fantasy vibes, but they do also have a story and they do also have stakes. So there's enough to keep you reading. The first book I want to recommend is A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. This is another one that was just delightful. I just had so much fun reading it. This book is set in a world where there are wizards, and every wizard has a different element that they specialize in. So if you're very lucky, you might be a water wizard or an air wizard or something, an element that's very abundant that has a lot of uses. But some people are plant wizards or wood wizards or tin wizards or something that is a little bit more specific and has a little bit more of a niche use. Our protagonist in this book is a dough wizard. So her magical element that she can work magic with is baked goods. And The main character in this book is very young. I believe she's 12 years old, but it's been a minute since I read this, so don't quote me on that. She's like middle school age. And she has been using her talent to work in her family bakery. And of course, the bakery is very popular because her treats are literally magical. But the story kicks off when wizards start disappearing in her city. And as she starts to investigate, she gets caught up in political intrigue and all of these plots. And it's just really fun. It's really wholesome. It's not completely without dark subject matter. There are some moments that I think can be upsetting, so I don't want to set it up like this is a book with no intense emotions. But at the end of the day, you're left feeling good after you read it. So highly recommend A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. I love all of T. Kingfisher's books, but very few of them are on Kobo Plus, but this one is. And then finally, my last recommendation is actually a series, and that series is The Weary Dragon Inn by S. Usher Evans. This is a recent discovery for me, and I am obsessed. I love these books so much. They combine cozy fantasy with another genre we talked about earlier, which is cozy mysteries. So you have the best of both worlds with a young innkeeper who is solving mysteries in her gorgeous fantasy world. Our main character in this series is Bev, short for Beverage Wench, who is an innkeeper at the Weary Dragon Inn. And Bev does not remember her life before the inn. She woke up 5 years before the first book with amnesia. She does not know where she came from. She does not know what her life was like before. The inn is the only life she has ever known. And we follow Bev as she navigates her village, as she solves problems for her neighbors, uncovers the secrets of various mysteries, and navigates a world where most magic has been made illegal by the Queen. The first book in the series is called Drinks and Sinkholes, and exactly like it sounds like, the mystery that Bev is trying to solve is these sinkholes that have been opening up all over her town and wreaking havoc and threatening the homes and the lives of her neighbors. So she's trying to figure out what's causing the sinkholes and how to stop it to save her town. So like A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking, these books do have stakes. There are dangers. It's not literally just slice of life, but they're very fun. They're very wholesome. And I think the overall reading experience is very feel good and very positive. Also, the Weary Dragon Inn books always make me want to cook. I feel like every time I finish one of these books, I end up baking bread afterwards because they just make me want to cook tavern food so badly. These are also great books to read seasonally. The first book is set during the summer. The second book is set during a fall festival. The third book is set during winter, right around the winter solstice. So if you are someone who enjoys seasonal reading, this series is really perfect for that. So that is my final recommendation. I hope that you'll check out one or more of these books. I think the selection on Kobo Plus is really promising, and I'm excited to see what new books I find on there. If you have any recommendations, please let me know. Please comment and tell me some books on Kobo that I should read. But in the meantime, I hope you stay safe. I hope you boycott Amazon, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.